Thank you everyone for joining. This is our last session of the day of the event. It is ensuring your dam evolves to match your changing business needs. This is a panel and will be moderated by Graham Allen, a media and dam consultant. Graham?
Well, thanks, Tracy, and thank you all for joining what is our final big session of the day. To sort of conclude our thinking about DAM, we thought we wanted to explore what's the future. What, as you've established your DAM, as you've built your DAM, what's next? Because in truth, it's never really done. It's not something that when you've gone live, you can sort of sit back and relax and it's all over. It's a discipline for your organization that you need to keep alive and that you need to keep thinking about how to stay relevant and stay very much in your users' sweet spot. And so we've assembled a great panel of experts, storied experts in the field, to share their thoughts and experiences in exactly that. And so maybe we'll start by letting each of you do just a little quick intro of yourselves. Kristen?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Burns. I have been in the DAM field for several years now. Last year started my own consultancy, Spark Focus, where creative content and tech teams can learn to understand each other and collaborate together. So hopefully I'm bringing that to my clients now, but I've also worked in the past for large companies as well as small startups too to get their dams going.
Very nice. Mark?
Hi everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Mark Finch. I'm General Manager for Tenavos. And I've been in the DAM industry for a long time. Some might say too long. Started in 1999 with a company called Informix Software, which got assumed by IBM. But at the time, I was competing with this little American upstart called Artesia Technologies. So joined them in the year 2000. Had a wonderful run as we try to figure out how to monetize little pictures of dinky cars, dinky toys for General Motors, and that started us on a pretty exciting path. Acquired by OpenText in 2004, and then a lovely journey of mashing in the likes of WCM, Web Content Management Systems, integrating into DAM through to acquisitions of social media platforms, and coined this term customer experience management that encompassed DAM. So that was probably the best part of 8 years. Then left for a stint of about 4 years at North Plains, if ever anyone remembers those. And then I had 5 years, I can't call it a sabbatical, where I drifted into e-commerce, where there's hundreds of vendors all trying to make an impact on the conversion metrics on websites, and that was a pretty crowded market. So sometimes we think DAM might be crowded, compare it to the e-commerce world, and got tempted back by many of the people I worked in the early days of Artesia who set up Tenavos in 2018 and asked me to come back and run Europe. So that's been an exciting journey. I just hit my 3rd year in November. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. And in that time, I've had many hats, from business unit managers with P&Ls through to general managers to head of sales through to quite a few hats. So hopefully I can add value today and look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. I am probably not going to be as detailed as that. Sorry, anybody's expecting that. Mine's not as exciting. So I'm the global product owner for creative platforms at Vodafone. And one of the products that I look after is the DAM. I have worked in the DAM field for, let's just say, a while. And when I joined Vodafone about 3 years ago, they had bought a global DAM, but hadn't implemented it and had never done a global DAM before. Every country had their own DAM, so they needed somebody to come in and kind of help them along on that journey. So I've been doing that for about 3 years. In that time, I've decided to challenge myself again and move that down to another platform, which has been really fun. And prior to that, so I've worked at KPMG, and I've done freelance work in digital marketing, but I was a journalist for 13 years. So I actually understand DAM and content from both the end user as a journalist and as a digital marketer in the marketing team and as the product owner. So yeah, please go easy on me with your questions today.
Actually, I think that is pretty exciting, and I think you'll see from the panel descriptions here that we're able to represent stories about keeping DAM going and what it is to sustain from all sorts of different angles. I think even Rachel, in what you described there was no "it's done" moment in what you do. So maybe to start, sort of think of the question, Kristen, maybe we'll start with you on this. What does it mean to be agile and to sort of stay ahead of your business, to anticipate where your business or your organization is headed?
Yeah, so when we first talked about this, I brought up I used to work for ThoughtWorks, where I worked with Martin Fowler, who invented the term agile to describe like a process versus using waterfall technology when you're doing a project. That's capitally agile. That's not what we necessarily need to talk about today, but it is something to kind of keep in mind. When I think of agile in this context, we're talking more about being flexible, being ready to go back to the decisions you made before, the people you worked with before, and see if that still is the best way to go forward. There's like this sunk cost kind of feeling that like, oh, well, we're already down this path, and that's good to a point for continuity, but really there's definitely nothing wrong with saying it's different now. You know, we need to look at this differently. We need to prioritize different things, and we need to proceed differently too. And one of the ways we do that is just break down silos. Make sure you're talking to lots of people who are either using your DAM system or will be championing it, and see what the priorities are there. And then see if the decisions you've made still make sense, or if you need to be flexible and make some changes.
And Rachel, as you described the global challenge, that's quite a broad spectrum to wrap your head around in terms of anticipating, because different parts of the world might be going in different directions. How do you recommend people thinking about approaching global?
I think the best thing is to tell the best story. I mean, I would say that given my history as a journalist, but I do find that if you have the right narrative, if you have the right understanding, you can all get on the same page. And in that way, the implementation or the journey for your DAM, whether it's upgrading or, having completely new strategy, a new way of approaching it, if you're all on the same page, that's going to make life so much easier. And you mentioned earlier that the work of the DAM is never done, and it isn't. So, you're going to need that community, and they're going to have to believe in that story, that never-ending story in some ways, and how that can manifest in different ways. So with the global team, for example, you have to think about what are we doing right now, but what's going to be suitable for one market isn't going to be suitable for another. You could have one country that's like, well, we need to do all of this right now. The other country is like, well, we just want to do step one. So the capability of all the different countries and all the different DAMs also matters. So again, but if everybody's on the same page, they'll buy into that concept more.
And Mark, you described quite a range of sort of products and experiences that maybe had different aspects of anticipation. What have you found most effective in anticipating where your organization is headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big lesson from me, from a vendor perspective, is how do you enable customers to make changes quickly? Because organizations change, they move at pace. And one of the big challenges from my experience has been quite often, there'll be lock into or reliance on vendor services or SI services, and you're always trying to keep up with the business change just because stuff takes too long to change or it's too technically difficult to change. So platforms that work well, I think, are ones where you can put the control of those changes into the business, and they're able to configure themselves versus actually relying on other third parties, and simple as setting up new metadata models, new metadata fields, new rules, new automations around that metadata. If that can be put in the hands of the business, then there's less reliance and less frustration on third parties, and you can actually keep up with the business, and not go back and frustrate them and say, sorry, this is going to take 3 months, 6 months, etc., to make changes, to implement the changes you need. And the other thing I'd add is I'd almost flip something and just say, how do you use DAM to evolve your business? I mean, we do a lot in the world of trying to track data, data first DAM. Let's track data at every stage of the creative life cycle process. So how do you then have a look at that data, understand what the implications are, and then drive the business to say, how about do X, Y, and Z in a great way Rachel's just described? How do you tell that story, but tell a story with some good data that is factual? So, in summary, enable the business, enable the DAM folks in a business to be able to change and keep up with the businesses. Use data to let the business know what the possibilities are. Should help affect that change. And Rachel was talking about global implementations. I mean, those can be pretty hard. Do you try and capture the requirements of every local market? Probably not. That'll take too long. Do you put a system in for global brands and start with there, and then go out to the local markets and extend and capture requirements, and then allow the system to be extended quite quickly to meet local markets? I've found every local market, I mean, with some of the big companies, you'll have 3 different countries that have got 3 completely different MarTech systems, be they PIM systems or campaign management systems, 3 different repositories, Box, SharePoint, whatever. So there's a lot of complexity out there, but I'd say get started in the knowledge that you've got a platform that can keep up with the business and be configured. Sorry.
Well, actually, Mark, you touch on a rather key topic there, is integrations, because DAM isn't an island. And DAM is going to be connected with all sorts of other systems in the broader ecosystem, in the broader environment. How do you recommend people stay on top of integrations and stay ahead of the integrations with other tools, perhaps as those other tools are changing too?
Yeah, we in the early parts of Tenemos, so a couple of years, I've been on a 3-year journey with the company, and in the early days it was all about how do you do point-to-point integrations with great robust APIs and lots of technology terms, and that's super. But you end up, so prior to 3 years, it would take maybe 3 months for an integration to build that with a lot of technologies. We set up a framework and an architecture, an integration framework, to then bring that down into 3-4 weeks to do point-to-point integrations. But still, you have that problem of relying on technology programmers, folks that understand API to do those integrations. So back to the first question, is that delays change in the business, and the teams might be lagging quite a few months before where the business really wants you to be. So we invested a lot of time a little over a year ago figuring out how do we do a platform that is low code. So in other words, you don't need technical programmers, but can visually create integrations, still exploit all those great APIs of other systems and our systems out there. So this low code no platform was released early part of the year, this year, something called Tenemos Connect. And what it means is we kind of own that configuration and the integration in our world. You don't have to have separate development platforms for people to have to maintain. And the other thing is for every change in all of these integrations, inevitably there's upgrades or APIs are deprecated. For every change, that's quite a big thing. Again, developers would have needed to get involved. For us, we maintain the integrity of those integrations in the Connect platform. So it allows you to deliver, honestly, you can deliver integrations in days, and allows you to integrate with more quicker just to keep up with the business.
Yeah, I'll speak to that too. So Mark brings up the idea of it being, central and how it integrates with the other tools, especially marketing tools. But I think of it like a hub, like it's going to be what makes each of those tools it's integrating with stronger. I saw there was a question in the Q&A too. We'll probably get to later, but I think that's part of it too. Is like if you're thinking of scaling, if you're thinking of having this be something that's valuable to people who may not even go into the dam ever, but it's going to be helpful for whatever tools they're currently using, how they currently work, and enrich those experiences too, then you've set up something that can scale and is valuable and does need to be kept current and does need to be supported with, with people, with budget, with all the things that are important, in concrete terms. Like it's lovely for people to say they love your dam, but it's show me that love, like make sure that it's actually coming back with the dedicated workers that'll be maintaining it, and those that like budget into next year, so how you can integrate it more into everybody's workflows.
So that actually is quite an interesting question, a tasty question that has come in from the audience, was really about anticipating the resources needed. And, so what tips do you folks have in sort of thinking through and planning for a dam program at the point of establishment, but also beyond? It's not done, right, when the dam launches. How do you recommend people stay ahead of that resource planning?
So I'll go first, because I'm in the middle of migrating our global dam to a different environment. So I can feel the pain. It's very fresh. In all honesty, I've done 3 or 4 really big implementations and migrations. And I can tell you that you're always going to unintentionally under-resource. And the time it takes, you're always going to underestimate. No matter how many cushions of time and people you put in, you probably are. But you're in good company, hopefully. Everybody's done that. I think, again, going back to that kind of story element, if you have that good story and everyone believes that this is the right thing for you to do as a company, that the dam and the direction that you're taking it in is right, then although you may need to up budget or increase the amount of resources you need or the time that you need, you're more likely to achieve that, in my opinion, or in my experience, definitely, that when you anticipate these things, although you have that cushion, you're always going to have to go back and retell that story and get that buy-in again. And going back to the point you made at the beginning, Graham, that it's a constant thing that you have to do. That's, as soon as you've implemented it, you're probably on to the next story of how you can update it. So you're going to need to have that kind of good scorecard with the resourcing and the deliverables in order to do the next thing with your dam. I don't know, I'll pass that question on to the next person.
Yeah, and just to add another perspective on Nina's question, to accurately anticipate resources. I mean, it tends to be a function of volume of assets, could be a function of type of assets. Is it images versus video? What's owning it? Also, how are you going to tag assets? Do you have librarians internally? Are you going to force your agencies to tag it? Are you going to get people to QA or quality control agencies that might have incorrectly tagged stuff? So you can have a reasonable stab early on based on volume of content. Is it going to be local markets or local brands that might be uploading and assuring content? So, number one, yes, there's absolute resources. I think I've been through projects where people thought it could be done part-time as someone's function internally IT. But no, it's definitely a big question. You can do quite a lot of planning up front. The other thing I'd say is sometimes where does that function sit? Does it sit in marketing ops? Sometimes it's under IT. It varies on where the function sits. The main thing is you want to make sure it's got ownership up the chain and visibility, because again, sometimes you can see with some companies it's been hidden in an archive function, kind of associated with how do we archive documents. This is all about when you're getting into the marketing technology world of making it visible, typically under marketing ops or digital transformation or something like that. Key thing, it's got to have ownership and people to understand the value.
Yeah, ownership is key, right? Is that resource planning is not going to happen, magically. It does need to be owned. It needs to be thought about. It needs to be guided. Rachel, maybe we'll come back to you, because I think related to resources workflow, and as workflows are going to evolve and change, something else that's probably not entirely in your control that you have to respond and react to and ideally anticipate. How do you recommend people think about that?
Carefully. I guess. Because I look after the creative platforms, I actually look after the workflow tools for the marketing operations side as well. So, and this is quite an interesting journey, one that is quite precious to me, because the very first solo implementation I did was for a workflow tool for the DAM and CMS many years ago. I think the workflow now and the integrations are becoming more and more important, and the AI and the automation is also becoming more important. The main stakeholders you have are probably, I think Mark alluded to this earlier when he said that the end users are not the tech teams and the configuration teams. They want things that are tech light. And for some, DAMs might be a bit tech heavy for them as well. Going into the author environment, doing the metadata yourself, those sorts of things, they're probably not thinking about, especially if the majority of your users are in brand and marketing. They've got a full-time job elsewhere. So the workflow can be a great, great tool to help you get everything you need for your DAM. So, if you have like some type of integration that allows your DAM to produce all the renditions that you need, or the different scaling, cropping, the integrations with maybe a AI that does your trademark somewhere on something, how you capture all of the permissions, all the versions, all the different ads, especially as we move to more programmatic uses of a DAM as well. The workflow tools now have all of that capability really quickly, really simply. And if you want your DAM to be successful, I believe that we need to start making those systems merge and thinking about them as a singular user journey. The entry point, where is that? Is that in the DAM? Can we not make it in the workflow, the tool that everyone's using anyway? And then can they see elements of the DAM inside that? Can you integrate those systems, that workflow, so that the AI, perhaps the automation, can capture that metadata without you having to sit there and write it for each one? Especially, a huge company like Vodafone, when they do ads and when they do big branded assets, that like a phone launch, won't say a brand, a phone launch, you'll have thousands of images. You have so much metadata that you'll just drown in it. So the workflow tool, I think, can be pivotal to ensuring that your DAM is utilized in the right way.
Yeah, and I'll add that the workflow from end to end too. So everything you're talking about when you're ingesting assets into the DAM, when you're searching, when you're making sure that you actually have the correct version of that phone and you're not sending out one that's a different brand or an older model or whatever that is, that's going to cause a lot of chaos. You want to minimize that too. A lot of people say a DAM is working well when you don't think about it, when you're not hearing problems. But I would also argue you need to hear about it. You need those champions that are going to go out and talk about it and say, also integrate it on the other end of the project. At the end of the project, make sure it's integrated in a way to get that reporting. Have them have a way of sharing a non-technical story of the success of this project, and find out early in the project what those pain points were and what you did to solve them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. The end-to-end workflow is critical, right from, hey, I've got an idea, I've got a brief, we're doing a phone launch, all the way from, okay, we've now approving those assets quite often. There's areas where, when you're doing a product launch, you can't release assets to the whole group. It's only small groups, so embargoed assets all the way through to, okay, now we're going to put it onto the various channels, whether that's driving conversion on websites or whether it's engaging and building a brand in social media. But you hit the nail on the head there, Kirsten. It is then measuring from those channels where people have engaged with content, trying to identify what's been successful, what has driven engagement in the social channels, what has driven conversion in the e-commerce channels, to then go back right to the early start of the creative process, to be able to go back to the creative leaders and say, hey guys, this really worked. This worked in these countries, these markets. So how about creating more content like that? Or even, God forbid, reuse content that worked in another continent or region, reuse that same content without. Yeah, I know. It's a scary thought, but yeah, that the workflow is essential. Connecting it all the way through the life cycle change, but importantly, capturing the data all the way through, so that when you've got that assets that are sitting on a social site, you know that, oh, actually that originated from a campaign brief over here, because we've managed to track all the data all the way through to the points of consumption.
And your stakeholders in that, they find it easy to use. You come to them later with an idea of, hey, let's do this with the dam. You're using a little bit of AI and automation. Let's do something else. They're much more open to experimentation if you've created something that's really easy for them to manage and to see.
So, Rachel, you said the magic word there, stakeholders. What? Because those are the customers, right? So, what stakeholders do you recommend, or stakeholder sort of cohorts or archetypes do you recommend sort of our audience very intentionally think about staying close to, and what techniques have you found effective in doing that?
I think genuinely across the different companies that I've worked in, it does depend on the company you're in and the type of business. A B2B is very different to an e-commerce type organization. So the stakeholder management, while similar, will be slightly different depending on the company and the business model. However, you do, obviously, the budget holders are very important, because if they say no, then you can't evolve anything. You're going to be doing what you're doing. But equally, you kind of have to get that balance, in my opinion, you have to get that balance right between the budget holders and the end users. Because those end users, if they're not happy, they're just going to start feeding it back. It will just go back up to the top that they're not happy. So you kind of need a bit of everything. I know that's not a very good answer, but sorry. But I think you need a little bit of everything. You need to engage with the end users, who are the stakeholders who are using it, and they will complain because they're the ones who are closest to it. But you could probably get a good idea of the main pain points across all the different, for me as a global owner, all the different regions. They'll have like a similarity of something that's not working or something that they need. If you've told that right story, if you've delivered what you said you would, they'll start to trust you, and you have that relationship where they'll say to you, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? Or this isn't working. In both those instances, you can then tailor that to then manage the more senior budget holders, stakeholders, and tell that kind of story of this is what's needed and this is what's happening out there with our competitors and this is what's happening here. So I think you need a bit of a balance between the senior leadership team as well as the end users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to make a very quick point. The other thing is also not necessarily engaging with folks that are traditional stakeholders, but parts of the business that might be digital transformation, and muscle into those meetings to say, what's our 3-year roadmap? Because there could be something on that roadmap in year 1, year 2, year 3 that actually DAM can really influence, and that just elevates the perspective of the DAM into a different world and opens up some pretty exciting conversations.
Yeah, I mean, you were just saying exactly what I was thinking, which is muscle into those meetings and find out what's happening next. Find out what's important and what's a priority company-wide or department-wide or whatever that is, and see, we're talking about how our DAM can evolve, right? How can we scale? How can we adapt to make it, match what the business is valuing at that point? And it's going to be changing. Whatever we thought was good right now, the technology will be updated. We weren't talking about AI a few years ago in this way. We were talking about it more for like functional AI of, helping put in some smart tags and things like that. And now we're talking about helping it design our, structures as well. So when we talk about that, like, we do have to make this adaptable. We do need to understand that at the core, we want to have those core, I'm going to say metadata, but just, information that isn't as changeable, and make sure that we're able to scale that out as things change, or as we, the goal is to expand, right? The goal is to make sure that it's tied into more other products as well as more people are using it. I mean, that might not be a goal across the board, but it does come up a lot with my clients that they want to make sure that it's not like this little walled garden that the 5 people use and the rest of the company thinks of as a cost, So if you can get in on those meetings and build those relationships to find out what is valued, then that'll help you plan out your next year of your dam.
And I think also, as Mark said a few minutes ago, it really changes the presence. It changes the presence that DAM has. We have like maybe only a minute or two left here. Kristen, I wanted to expand a little bit on, you said muscle in. That's a really important phrase. It's a really important message, I think, for our audience to take away. Yeah. Is that as leaders of DAM discipline and organization, they really are empowered to go lead and push. And what sort of techniques have you found effective in that muscling in? Because it sounds harder than it might actually be.
I almost didn't say muscling in, but I'm going to stand by it. It's fine. Snacks, smiles, solving problems. I mean, those are the big ones. And then people will invite you back.
Chocolate. Always win with chocolate.
And I welcome it too.
There's a question, actually.
Which is an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I think I understand the point that you make. I don't know if it's industry standard. So I've seen marketing ops and creative ops sit in parallel, even though the workflow and processes are so integrated. In our company, that they did work as 2 different elements, and we managed in our workflow tool to merge them because the end goal was to have that end-to-end workflow. In a content strategy. So from the idea, the creation, and the marketing ops, and what happened to it after it was created, we wanted that to sit within the system, and the DAM is integrated into that system as well. It's really tricky, and it's so tricky because in a huge company like this, there's so many moving parts, and if there's any element that's not done correctly, then it can make the whole thing fall apart. So my advice on starting a journey like that, if you are going to, is to start small and just start with one department, add in departments as you go. Once it's done well, it's pretty easy once you have that blueprint to recreate it. Personally, I think this should be a blueprint, especially as we move to more integrated dams and, integration across all of MarTech. I think, Christine, you said it earlier that the dam is like the hub. And if it's going to be a true hub, then yeah, we need to start thinking about the workflow and integrating all of it together.
Well, Rachel, what do you think, because that industry standard phrase is sort of key there, what do you think could be an industry standard versus what do you think it would make sense for each organization to define and shape for itself in its own needs, its own requirements?
I'm not a fan. I think Mark had a point to make as well, but I'll just answer quickly. I don't think there should be like an industry standard aside from you've got to have a true integration of all your software. I'm not a fan of industry standards purely because each industry is quite different. Like telecoms is very different to, like an e-shopping, for example, or a big clothing retailer. The requirements, the DAM requirements, those sorts of things are very different. But I think if we as a DAM community have an industry standard of that must be integrated with the entire end-to-end operation and can't be an end thought and dumping ground, that's probably going to help towards the evolutions that we all want to see. And sorry, Mark.
No, not at all. I was just going to add, I was top down just thought on what's a great question and just jotted down I'd come from the KPIs of marketing ops and creative ops. So if I just top of my head, marketing ops, yeah, how do I engage with my audience and sell more and build a better brand? Probably those kind of KPIs and measures and areas they're looking at. Creative ops, how do I make stuff better, faster, cheaper at the same quality or higher quality? So it depends on the businesses, but while those KPIs appear completely different, underneath all of that, you've got a stack, both involve content. One is content creation with content ops, the other one is content distribution. So if you're able to connect and integrate pieces at the platform layer, you can probably get those two different views of metrics and figures out of art. I forgot content reuse in the creative ops side. Are you reusing content? Have you got the ability to reuse content? And then over to the distribution, marketing ops. How do I engage with your audiences in the organisations you're at? How do you distribute that same content? Back to Rachel talked a lot about automation of workflows. How do you streamline that? So while initially they might seem two different functions, under the covers there probably is lots of similarity around. They're all driven around content, but an industry standard. I at the moment, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, wow, that's a big job, because it is this end-to-end workflow, and you're standardizing, cradle to or creation to distribution. That's a tough ask, but certainly worth a follow up on.
Achievable if amazing if you can do it.
Yeah, well, that actually might be a whole panel on its own.
Yeah, I was going to say, to Graham's point, I do think that the DAM pros in this call do have a lot of power when it comes to driving these conversations and asking those questions and making these teams that might not always work together or have the same KPIs at least understand the value of the DAM that you're creating together. And
build the right answer for your organization, even if it's not a single answer for the industry. And I think in a moment we'll be passing the mic back to Tracy for her closing remarks for the whole day. But any final thoughts on this topic, Rachel?
Oh, I knew you were going to come to me first. I just had that feeling. I guess final thoughts are, for me personally, these sorts of events. They have always been really, really helpful, because I think, Kristen, you said it earlier, that no dam is an island. I'm pretty sure it was you who said that. And it's the same for you as the individual if you're looking after and responsible for the dam. It's great to share ideas and to ask the questions and just to hear what everybody else is doing. You can't learn about dams just from reading, and you can't learn about dams just from what you're implementing or what you're doing. So it's always good to join in a community, I guess.
Kristen,
after you.
Oh, sure. So, agreed with Rachel. And I feel like this conversation has been just like a starting off point for hopefully a lot of conversations that everyone on this session is going to take back into their groups too. I think when we think about our dams, we do want to think of them in terms of what our needs are and what the company, the group, the organization's needs are, and just kind of serve for that. Anytime you get complicated more than that, just go back to the original goals and see if you can get back in there. So, and don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid that, what you've done is the only way.
Super. And final thoughts from me is everyone out there, please push us, vendors out there, your partners out there, to be more flexible, more adaptable, integrate at speed, because that's where the value is, and I'd say push us to keep being innovative. So appreciate your time.
Brilliant. Honestly, thank you all. We could have talked for much longer if we had the flexibility. It's such a tasty topic. We are out of time. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and experiences here. And hopefully Tracy is hovering ready to offer her closing remarks for the day. Tracy, back to you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Graham, Mark, Rachel, Kristen. Wonderful conversation and insight. So thank you very much.